Hello, this is Virtualis the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. A discovered check occurs when moving a piece unblocks and reveals an attack on the opponent's king by another piece. This is an especially powerful tactic due to the forcing nature of the move. As we will see in the computer evaluation of the game I played today, I successfully implemented ploy to create a discovered check was the difference between a completely winning position and equality if my opponent had countered the move. Please enjoy! So let's have a quick look at the review. This is chess.com's algorithm, and I played relatively well in this game. So almost 90% accuracy, the opponent around sort of 79, around 80%. And overall, I had greater accuracy in moves. We had a fairly similar number of inaccuracies, but the opponent did make one blunder. And I think that blunder made a fairly big difference in the course of this game. Let's now move on to the analysis. So in this game, I played with the black pieces, opponent white. They led with e4, as usual for me, e5. They played knight f3, knight c6, and now d4. So the Scotch game. I quite like the Scotch game. I quite like playing against the Scotch game. Actually, I don't usually play the Scotch myself, as it usually leads to some open lines. And I kind of like the open lines and playing aggressively. And often when white plays the Scotch, I end up with some good counter-attacking opportunities that fits my style in play. Now, in the Scotch, I usually always capture, then sort of knight captures back, and now there's a tension. Obviously, I cannot capture back due to this, and then the opponent will take the full center. So that's no good. So in this situation, it's bishop out with an extra attack on the knight. Not uncommonly, knight will now capture knight at this point, and what I do is capture back with the b pawn. And the idea here is that now I can strike forward with d5 supported by that pawn. Opponent now plays f3, which it's okay, I suppose, but it does cede some advantage to black. So immediately now striking with d5. So with the risk of capturing, opponent obviously cannot capture back, try to control the center. Opponent plays knight c3, so now sort of with an extra attacker, which is prospectively an okay move. I've now provided an extra defender in the form of the knight to f6 and also developing the other knight. Opponent pushes e5, ostensibly with a threat. However, I can pin with queen to e7. So it's interesting to me that Stockfish thinks that moving knight here to d7 is best, and I suppose that makes sense. The opponent isn't going to capture, given it's defended by a pawn. You're not going to lose a piece for a pawn. However, I thought this was a more aggressive line. Opponent now decides to unpin with the bishop e2, and that was a mistake. You can see that was a mistake, as that pawn is straight up hanging and I capture the pawn. And more than that, it also pins to the king. At this point, I decided to again play dangerously, play aggressively, queen d4, and my logic here was potentially to create check. And in fact, doing that move, if the opponent plays a little bit inaccurately, it may well be checkmate. So pretty much the only logical move for the opponent is queen captures queen, I capture back, still in a nice position here, and we now move to a queenless middle game, which is fine for me. Opponent develops their other bishop to d2, I now short castles, opponent long castles, and now I play knight e4, and here, slight advantage. I was happy to potentially trade off some pieces. So the threat is this. So I thought they would likely capture, and they do so, pushing my pawn further forward into the enemy territory. And you can notice almost all my opponent's pieces are stuck on the back two ranks where I've got some development. King now moves, ostensibly to defend that pawn as well. However, I've got the semi-open b file, so that gives, you know, a nice place for my rook. So rook b8. Opponent, you know, pushes a pawn to threaten the bishop, trying to push the bishop back, which it does. However, anytime you push a pawn in front of the king, it now weakens the defense of the king, and now those light squares are open. So obviously, firstly, I do need to move my bishop out of the way. So I bring the bishop back to c5. They centralize the other rook, so rook he1, which I think makes sense. However, now I saw this opportunity. So there is a potential discovered check. And if they allow that, then that pawn captures that bishop. And I thought that that would place me in a pretty good position, possibly winning position. So bishop f5. Now you'll see that this is almost equality. So why is that the case? Now the reason for that is that this move, if my opponent plays properly, doesn't work, because they could straight up play g4, which is defended by that bishop, so I can't capture back. And then if I try to maintain on the diagonal, they can push that pawn a second time. So what it will look like is this. If I try to remain on the diagonal, this bishop is now trapped. So basically that doesn't work. That whole plan to create discovery actually doesn't work if they see, you know, g4. Now, what did the opponent do? Now, they didn't see g4, and so allowed it, and that was their blunder, the serious blunder. So from almost equality all the way to minus 6.8, basically 6.8. So minus 6.8 is basically losing. It's basically a losing position. I capitalize on that, forward, discover check, opponent forced to move. Now here, the real gangster thing is I don't even need to capture. Now, I did see there was this potential move here, but I discounted. I opted not to calculate it because I thought, if I capture, I am a straight up piece up, and I should be able to win. I should be able then to liquidate the position. But the potential here is bishop to this to a3, and you think, oh, can't they capture? No, they can't, because that would be checkmate. So they cannot, in fact, capture the bishop back. And what pretty much needs to do, because of course, you know, that pawn is pinned to the king. So it's not like they can even move that pawn forward. The only good move, in fact, is for the opponent to capture that pawn. Rook now captures. And the opponent is in a serious position, because the next rook move will be, again, another discovered check. So in fact, the best move here is probably rook to this square, or potentially that square, which means that is now captured. The opponent can potentially capture back, but then that is also captured. So this is very, very bad. So this whole line is very, very bad for white. Now, I didn't quite see that in the actual game. So in the actual game, what I chose to do was simply to liquidate. Now, the opponent moved the king to the wrong position, because that comes, of course, with check again. Not that it really matters, because that gets captured back by the rook, which, of course, now allows me to pin that rook to the king. So really, this is not a good position for the opponent. Because I didn't move the king out of the way, move it out of the pin, I thought there was now an opportunity to move a rook fd8, and so that, again, is a forcing move, because I could potentially capture that, and they can't even capture back. So now the opponent must defend. They must defend, and now captures, 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 captures. So now I'm liquidating pieces. I still have the bishop and rook versus one bishop, and now I've got a skewer with the rook, and happy to trade the rook for the bishop, because now I've entered an endgame where the opponent has only pawns. I still have a bishop. Completely winning. This is a completely winning position for me. I just have to mop things up. So let's start pushing these pawns on this side. So there's 2 pawns here, 3 pawns here. Pawn majority, definitely should be able to promote. Bring the bishop back just to give an extra defense. And the opponent is moving the king, trying to get rid of some of the pawns here, but it doesn't matter. That's now a passed pawn. Promotion is guaranteed. Now, they're trying to push this pawn, doesn't work, because the promotion square is a light square, and I've got a light square bishop. So basically, slot the light square bishop there. It is now absolutely impossible for that pawn to promote to a queen. Yep, I just opted to just play easily. I was playing for quickly here rather than trying to calculate necessarily the best moves, just to make sure the moves are not likely to cause a stalemate and definitely not going to blunder an error. So king moves there, that's fine. Queen, no, mock up that last pawn. And here, be very careful not to cause a stalemate. Yep, zap. And here I thought, bang. Now, if I did that, that was actually a forcing line made in one. Here, I opted not to calculate. I thought, if I go there, definitely that protects the bishop. Also forces the king to move, definitely has to move here. And I saw that as a pretty easy checkmate. After that, the opponent, of course, opted to resign at this point. Clearly, they can't win. So good game, GG. The discovered check forced the opponent to lose a piece for a pawn, and there was then the potential devastating line where the opponent would lose even more material. In the actual game, I chose to play the lower risk strategy of safely liquidating the opponent's pieces in forced balanced trades to maintain a one-piece advantage in the endgame. A win is still a win, even if it's less beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.